whatever life holds in store for me. I will never forget these words. With great power comes great responsibility.
This is the aphorism my favorite superhero carries with him. Spider-Man. Not only my favorite, but many people's because of just how relatable he is and what his story represents. Peter Parker is a normal kid from Queens. He's not a billionaire, he's not an alien from a different planet, he's not a Norse god, and not a mystical wizard. Sure, I and probably none of you have any spider-related superpowers either, which you can say makes him unrelatable, but if you allow some suspension of disbelief, he's a pretty down-to-earth superhero. And that's because the struggles he faces is much like a lot of us. Peter struggles with money and school and relationships, and despite having the power of a superhuman, oftentimes can't save the very people he loves the most. But he tries his best, and that's inspiring, which is why I liked this character so much as a kid. I looked up to him. I wanted to wear the mask and be Spider-Man. And he was my favorite superhero from there on out. Until recently, on a rewatch of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I'm by far not the first video essayist to say that the Spider-Verse films are a modern-day masterpiece. And on so many levels, these movies are out of this world, yet are still very personal stories about growing up, carving your own path, and acceptance. And don't even get me started on the animation. Genuinely feels like an art gallery in motion. I think there needs to be a class on visual storytelling and animation around these movies because they understand this language so well. And personally, between the two, I know it might be a slightly unpopular opinion, but I actually enjoy Across the Spider-Verse more than Into the Spider-Verse. Yeah, I know the big problem with Across the Spider-Verse is the giant cliffhanger the movie ends on. Having Miles' arc go unfinished in a movie where he's the main protagonist and putting so much emphasis on Beyond the Spider-Verse to satisfyingly conclude this trilogy not only makes Across the Spider-Verse feel incomplete, but opens it up to potentially aging very poorly if Beyond doesn't stick the landing. It's a risky decision, especially given that Spider-Man trilogies don't have the best track record with their third installments, if they even get one at all. But if this is the one to break the trend, and I really hope it does, it'll seem like a genius move on behalf of the filmmakers. So I do give it a little bit of grace as we're still waiting Beyond, and we're in a kind of gray area at the moment. But ultimately, I've overcome my personal gripes with this, or at least for the most part, I'm able to overlook it, and that's because of Gwen Stacy. Like I said, a big theme of this movie is acceptance. Miles wants to join the Spider Society and be accepted as a legitimate Spider-Man, just like all the other Spider people. He thinks the Spider Society is a place where he'll be understood and accepted, but inevitably learns that they see him as an anomaly. Someone who really doesn't deserve to be there, despite everything he's done to prove that he does, and ultimately feels betrayed by the very people he aspired to be. He's going on a journey to write his own story and do his own thing. It's self-empowering, relatable, and it's a deeply personal story, and I think this theme carries over through just as well with Gwen. On the flip side, Gwen's story is about self-love, honesty, and, again, acceptance. It's about being honest with her father and herself on who she really is, her identity as Spider-Woman. And I can't help but to read this as an allegory for coming out. Now, if you think I'm reaching and don't see this at all, that's fine. The beautiful thing about art is we all get something different from it. And also, not everything is meant for you. You can click away and keep it pushing. But to me, Gwen's story couldn't be more of an allegorical story about coming out if they tried. I know online there's a lot of discourse about whether Gwen is trans or not, and if that's what you take away from it, good for you. It's ambiguous, and honestly, that's the way I prefer it because it's not about any one specific identity, but rather the experience many queer people will eventually face. Having to be honest with themselves first, and then having to brace the uncertainty of being accepted and loved by the people in their life. It's not easy. In the beginning of this film, Gwen is looking down the barrel of a gun her own father is unknowingly pointing directly at her. To me, this is like how queer people grow up in households to unsupportive parents. It feels like there's a metaphorical gun being aimed at them ready to go off at any moment, and they're forced to hide who they really are. And as Gwen unmasked, her father's look of shock and disbelief, along with the shifting colors behind him going cold, tells us all we need to know about how he feels. The genuine dismay and alarm in Gwen's voice. Shout out to Haley Steinfeld for really bringing this character to life, as she asks her dad to not be a cop, and if he's really that afraid of her, is just pure heartbreak. But the reason why I think Gwen's story is more important now than ever is because
10 years after the Supreme Court ruled in favor of same-sex marriage across the United States, it could now be overturned.
I'm not exactly sure why it wasn't until last week that this story became a media firestorm, but now it's at the forefront of the political zeitgeist once again. Now, I firmly believe overturning Obergefell would be another major step backwards for the country and for marriage equality. The good news is, it likely won't happen, at least not with Davis's appeal, for two reasons. For one, the Supreme Court receives about 8,000 petitions every year, and recently they only take about 60 to 80 of them, meaning it's highly unlikely any one case will even be heard by the court. Secondly, this is an objectively poor vehicle to do it. Davis's petition doesn't really explain why overturning Obergefell is necessary to resolve her case and isn't the central thrust of her legal argument. I'm not saying it's impossible, just highly unlikely. I've also linked 2 articles in the description that goes way more in depth into why this likely won't happen, but hopefully this helps ease you if this has been a concern of yours. That being said, rights are still under active attack under the Supreme Court, albeit in more subtle ways. In the past several years, the Supreme Court weaponized the First Amendment to legalize discrimination against same-sex couples in the marketplace, forced public schools to censor LGBTQ+ books, and compelled states to fund private schools that discriminate against LGBTQ+ students. And next year, it could very likely strike down state bans on LGBTQ+ conversion therapy for minors. Just because we may win this battle doesn't mean the war is won. And telling stories that represent the queer experience and showing that queer people can be just as heroic and strong as anyone is extremely important, especially in the face of ones trying to disenfranchise them. Gwen's story resolves quite nicely. She stands up for herself and confidently tells her dad to arrest her if he must. And to Lieutenant Stacy's credit, he's grown. He can't do it, deciding he'd rather quit because not even his job matters anymore. Gwen is the best thing he's ever done, an act of love and acceptance. I know for some of you, unfortunately, you'll never live out that part of the analogy, and I'm sorry. I really am. You deserve to be loved and accepted and have the same rights as anyone else. But my channel and what I'm trying to create here on YouTube will always be a safe space for you. I don't have a large following here on YouTube. I have less than 2,000 subscribers, and I can't exactly start a cultural movement like Louis Rossman can with the clippy profile pictures. So I don't know if I qualify as having great power, but I do believe I have the responsibility to at least speak up when rights are under attack like this. Anyone can wear the mask. It's not about how big or small the impact, but about trying to do what's right. And that's what Spider-Man represents to me. Thanks for watching. Peace.